Hello, hello, my friends out there in cello land. How are you this evening? I'm excited to be live here with you again in the evening. Wherever you're watching from in the world, let me know where you're watching from, and let me know how your cello day, actually, even if it's just your regular day, how is your day going? As requested, let's start the discussion here talking about vibrato. And I believe the term was continuous vibrato, which I interpret as meaning, wanting to know more about what we can do to work on keeping the vibrato going to keep it I saw at 11. Watching from the US. Awesome. Central Time, just like me. So what can we do to keep the vibrato going and not let it stop? Okay. It's important first, okay, to remind ourselves, forgive me, it's important to remind ourselves what needs to happen when we are working on something physical, okay? And vibrato is a very physical thing that's happening over here. This is so important. I know I've said it many times, and I probably said it just the other night, and that is, when it comes to physical stuff, physical habit, something some motion that you're working on, it is so important that you remember that there is no secret sauce, there's no secret remedy, there's nothing special, magical thing that superstars do, except maybe the thing that sets them apart is realizing that you just have to spend time on it, okay? That you just have to focus in on it. Maybe the trick is when realizing that we, in our practice, maybe we haven't spent that much time on it, or maybe we didn't do that many repetitions of it, okay? So, just like if you're working on the bow hold, and you say, oh, I have a habit of, lifting my pinky off the frog, or, oops, get my camera down a little bit, or, I have trouble keeping my bow straight, oh, I have this habit, Well, what can I do to get rid of it? And I'm not trying to simplify everything. I'm not trying to oversimplify the problems or the solutions, but it is imperative that we keep this perspective a little bit, that maybe sometimes it is that simple, okay? Because we can overcomplicate things really fast, and I know I've done that way too often in my own life and in my own cello playing and learning and practicing. Is sometimes it's just better for us in the long run if we don't overcomplicate it, okay? So with that in mind, okay, if you want to have this idea of, continuous vibrato, then the first thing is just to focus on keeping your arm moving and listening for it. And of course, I would say practice it on a scale. All right. So a few particulars. So let's just do G major, okay? So what I'm thinking about, and we'll give ourselves a few reminders about, good vibrato motion here in a second, but I'm thinking about my fourth finger now being in position and being ready. And am I vibrating into the next note? Even if it's a big shift like that one. And I've even heard people say, and actually teach it this way, that throwing this finger down, like you hear that little tap, is a part of keeping the vibrato going. Now, I don't think you have to do it very hard, okay? But what I do think you have to think about is my hand moving? And I have to be just so focused on keeping the motion going during that moment of transition. All right, so few particular things that are happening. One is my next finger is, or the one that I'm vibrating into, is ready. Obviously, I can't have a very smooth motion where I'm vibrating into the next note or keeping the vibrato going if this finger is down here or it's up here or straight or whatever, okay? So my left hand posture, my left hand position has to be really, really good. It has to be really, really solid for this to work, okay? If I'm still just working on, figuring out how my left hand is supposed to be on the fingerboard, I should be figuring that out first, right? I should be getting that physical habit down of keeping these fingers arched, keeping them at the ready, all right? Because there is no continuous vibrato unless my finger position is ready like this to go down while I'm vibrating back and forth. And I'm thinking about vibrating into the note. Or I should have played here. A lot of times, we're stopping the vibrato, okay, before we change to the next note. And honestly, part of the reason we have trouble forming this good habit is that we're not even aware that we're stopping, okay? All right. We're not even aware that the hand has stopped moving when we're getting to the next note. So just to go back to this idea is the first step is just to focus on continuing the motion, okay? All right. Across the change, from this note to whatever the next note is, okay, is my hand continuously moving, okay? All right. And is my finger in a position, is it in a shape that allows it to go down on the string accurately, right? Can't be over here, can't be all wonky and all over the place. Okay, now, a few reminders about just some good vibrato motion, right? We use this arm vibrato, as people call it, right? And the way I always start teaching, vibrato to, I shouldn't say beginners, all right? It's not, we don't teach vibrato to beginner cellists. I just mean when you're at the beginning stages of learning vibrato is what I mean to say, all right? It's a good idea to shift, because then my whole arm is moving, right? Here's what happens, is you start making this shifting motion, and what happens is that as we come to a stop on a single note, a lot of students will start to twist like this. And see how this is like more of a wrist finger action, all right? My arm is turning over like this instead of moving, all right? I want you to look at this part of my arm over here below my wrist going towards my elbow, all right? See how it's moving down the same way it would be moving if I was shifting, okay? And that action keeps going, right? I can't have continuous vibrato because look, if I'm wristy twisty here like this, okay, all right, if I'm just using my finger, then how am I playing in any kind of way that's like where my finger is ready to go down, as we were just discussing? But when I use my whole arm, I can use my whole arm, and you see it rotating here. I can have my finger ready. Make sure I'm rotating through the change. And my singular goal is my hand continuing to move. Okay. Let's see. There was a question here. Thank you for the question. How do you continue the vibrato in a higher position? Okay. That is a great question, because the answer is it's the same but different. Or it's different but it's the same. Okay. So number one is when I'm practicing it, is my hand continuously moving? Okay, same thing. That should be number one. So I'm still thinking about my whole arm, just as if I was shifting. Could you play in late from you? You have to repeat that for me there. Could you play in late from U.S.? All right. All right. It says, do you need a lot of movement in your fingers to make a loud, melodic, vibrated note? Huh. That's an interesting question. I think, remember when we're moving here, we are opening up the sound, okay? And the more we move, okay, then the more we change the pitch, okay? Do we have an opportunity to change the volume over here in our left hand? If the volume and the amount of sound changes, then it's between whether we don't do it or do it. Okay? I don't know that if we change the pitch more, maybe it seems louder. I don't know. I don't know that makes it more sound. I think if that's the question. What I would say, what it does remind me of, though, if I can here for a moment, that I was going to get to anyway, but thank you for the question, is that my fingers have to be relaxed, right? So I think in the beginning, when students are trying to think about vibrato and continuous vibrato motion, obviously accurate pitch is really, really important. But also important, maybe a little more important in the beginning, is just that you get this motion correctly, right? Because here's what happens is that we go to the performance, and I already said it, we end up with this kind of wristy, twisty thing here that is not good. And so it's so important that we maybe learn to live just briefly, just temporarily, all right? I'm not telling you to play out of tune on purpose all the time, and especially you don't want to play out of tune in a performance, but I do think it's important to really let your fingers move, even if the pitch kind of gets destroyed momentarily, so that you can feel this arm opening up and moving. A really wide vibrato, we would say. Okay, all right. Make it extra, extra wide in the beginning, just so you can teach your left hand to be a little more free, to be a little bit more loose and relaxed while you're trying to do this. It's my Zevia tea, organic tea, peach flavored. It tastes good. I was about to say it tastes like a diet. Why would anybody drink regular diet when Zevia tastes perfectly great? Okay, that has nothing to do with cello playing, but I just thought I would share. Okay. My little caffeine boost here. Where were we? Okay. Caitlin asked a question. How long have you been playing? 35 years. Exercises for vibrato. Well, one I've been talking about here is just that make sure that when you're doing your scales, that if this is something you're trying, if this is a goal you have, and this is something you're trying to improve, that you incorporate this into your scales when you're playing them. All right, so whatever scale you're working on, it doesn't matter, okay? But just spend a little time saying, I'm going to focus, or I'm going to spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever on, is my arm continually moving, all right? And as I'm looking at the reflection, I hope is everybody out there practicing in front of a mirror like on a regular basis? I find that I feel like I recommend this all the time, and then students come in and I say, oh, so how's the mirror practice going? Oh, I haven't found one yet. Or I practice with it sometimes, okay? Especially because there's a question here about thumb position and playing in the upper positions. If you're focused in on trying to, make this better physical motion, you can't really see it from here. Everything that I'm checking on for myself, I'm looking over there and seeing my reflection to make sure that I'm doing what I'm telling you guys. I'm not looking over here. There's no way. I can't see that. Okay? You must practice in front of a mirror so that you can see whether or not this whole thing is moving and that I'm not doing this. Okay? Not letting the hand twist and roll over. See how my wrist is twisting? I'm actually rotating, okay? And my forearm isn't actually moving forward, back and forth, okay? So if at any point this motion confuses you, like, am I doing it right? Am I making the right motion? You just need to shift, right? How is my arm moving? I don't do this to shift, right? I don't roll over my hand to go up to upper positions. I go like this, right? And this part of my arm is going down and back like this, right? It's the same thing when you go. To vibrate, this is moving forward. Sorry, I kind of skipped over the other the other question, and I apologize. You guys asked about doing vibrato up high. All right, I'm keeping my arm. I'm keeping my arm loose. I'm keeping my fingers loose. Okay, all right. I have to make sure that I'm not having a lot of tension in all of my other fingers, right? Of course, I have to have some tension in the finger that I'm using, yes, because it has to go down on the string, okay? But I have to make sure that, and my thumb is down, but it's just my anchor, right? It's just kind of like helping my hand stay there in position. And I'm staying loose, okay? Maybe actually this would be a good exercise. I'm just sitting here just like, vibrating without actually using the bow, all right? And what am I thinking about? Well, I'm thinking about the rest of my fingers being relaxed, okay? I'm thinking about the top of my hand being relaxed, okay? I'm making sure that this is still moving correctly the way that it's supposed to and not doing this, right? This is what we tend to want to do, is to roll over and do the twist here instead of everything moving together, right? Right. If we were together in person, I sometimes do this with students. I walk over and grab their forearm just a little bit. All right, make it move back and forth. Okay. So really, the only thing that's super different here is this thumb is up here, but remember my thumb is just a. I shouldn't even call it an anchor because it's pretty relaxed. It's not like it's holding the rest of my hand down. It's just like a reference point, really. Okay, it's there because if it's down here, that kind of creates some tension. It's just good for it to be up on top of the string, so it's doing what the other fingers are doing. So even if I'm not actually using the thumb, I put the thumb on the string, okay, because it helps me relax. There's a comment here. Hardware stores, mirror. Yeah, when I was in college, and for a very long time, I remember, Target, Walmart would have the skinny, flexible. This thing's not even made of real glass, and I said recently, I should look it up. I've called it the $5 special for 20 years. It probably doesn't cost $5 anymore. But you just need to be, the two most important things are, be able to see your contact point here, yeah, and to be able to see what this left hand is doing, all right? And you don't need a big, huge mirror for that. You just need the little skinny one, and it's like 4 feet long. It's not even a full-size mirror, all right? Just so you can see from here and then see up here, yeah? And it's very lightweight. You could put it up with, command strips or something, little Velcro things. You could put them on the wall. There are mirrors in every practice room at University of Alabama. There was one big, huge mirror down on the first floor in the piano practice rooms that I used to love and go and practice in front of. Because, obviously a bigger mirror is better. It's nicer. It's nice to see what my right hand is doing when I go way out to the tip of the bow. But, if I can see my contact point, and I can just see if my bow is straight or not, that's the most important, okay, and being able to see this left-hand shape. For thumb position or vibrating up high, absolutely, you have to have a mirror. You have to have a mirror so that you're not doing, some crazy something there with your hand, okay? So important to use the mirror. And, or some other kind of reflection, if you can make your computer work or your iPad or whatever, something just so you can see what's going on without having to lean over like this, which is so bad for our posture. So. What other questions? As I'm sitting here playing the Swan. Some cellists believe in really kind of leaping up, all right, in this kind of exaggerated motion. I think maybe that's one place where that actually works really well. And I would definitely take a piece like this and challenge myself. Is my hand vibrating? Even there, am I keeping the vibrato going? Okay. Am I keeping my hand moving while I'm shifting around and whatever else that I'm doing on the piece? iPad is great. Yeah. John said, using the iPad. All right. Angelina, a question about dynamics? Like, just clarify that, what it is that you wanted me to chat about with dynamics. Actually, last night, I have a student that's going to do Goldterman. He's auditioning for, university orchestra. He's moving off to college next week. And that was actually one of my final parting things for him to, for polishing up the piece, was actually to go record himself and be really brutally honest with himself about the dynamic contrast, right? Because we can look at dynamics and do them, okay? But across the three phrases, or you have a whole section and it starts mezzo forte and then it goes to forte and it goes to fortissimo, recording yourself and listening back and asking, did I really achieve three different dynamic levels in this passage that kind of goes together, okay? How to play dynamics to sound musical. This is a great question. And I'll start with the most important one, which is, am I making a solid sound when I'm playing softly? All right. And actually, don't let me forget, I have a great answer, something that's been on my mind, VX, 9X, the question you asked just now, how to keep a soft vibrato, loud vibrato constantly. I do have something to say about that, but okay. But how to play dynamics sound musical. a lot of times when we are playing softly, now it might be marked in the music, like it might be marked flautando, or it might be marked, sottovoce, Sottovoce is like this when you have a kind of a breathy voice, okay, and the composer wants this business on purpose, all right? But if that stuff's not there, flautando, sottovoce, those are just the two that always come to mind, then my pianissimo has to have some vibrancy to it, yes? So if I really want to be my best, most musical self when it comes to dynamics, then I got to make sure that I'm being really, really strict about my contact point, right? So in order to really play pianissimo, but keep the string ringing the way it's supposed to, using enough bow, using enough arm weight, I got to bring my bow back, and I got to be really proactive about, coming down here for forte and fortissimo, and coming back here for piano. So that's number one. Okay, what is the contact point doing? I would also focus in on, changing the bow speed. A lot of times we're like going back and forth between loud and soft and loud and soft, and we're kind of maybe jerking the bow. And one of the things that happens that, makes the piece less musical is when we do unintentional accents in the piece because we're trying to get to some part of the bow that we need to be in to play loud or soft, okay? So what can I do to plan my bow a little better, but also, practice what I call floating, all right, which we learned to do early on, in book 2. There's probably a piece of book 1, and it's escaping me now. But like long ago. So that moment right there, so I play forte and then I play soft, and I need to be down here, okay? I need to be in. So this is straight to your question here. I need to be here because the last line starts forte, right? So I had this. Right? Now, it wouldn't be very musical if I did this. Okay, this big, loud, unintentional crescendo because I'm trying to get back to the frog for the last line. Okay, so the thing that makes it more musical when it comes to dynamics is planning out your bow. Okay, where am I supposed to be? What do I need to do to get from here? If I've got to be at the frog for the forte for the last line, am I making sure that I float down there? Okay, that I really control. And basically what we're talking about is I'm controlling my arm weight so that I can get where I need to in the bow without making some unintentional sound that the composer didn't ask for, right? Okay. VX9X, how do you keep a soft vibrato or a loud vibrato constantly? Yes, this is really important. Independence of hands. I was watching Amit Peled, who posts a lot of things on YouTube. He's the cello professor at Peabody, wonderful cellist and a great teacher. And I love watching his stuff. And he gave the example of, like when you play Dvorak, at the beginning, he said, and he's like, use that as an example. And he had a couple of other examples. He's talking about, your right hand might be forte, all right, but your left hand is piano, right? It's so supple and soft, okay? And so, to your question that, how do I maintain, I'm doing this, if I'm trying to do this nice, very sort of tighter faster vibrato. Again, it goes back to, am I focusing on that thing in my practice session? Okay, if that's something I want to achieve, then I'm focused on separating my two hands on a regular basis, right? I have to spend some time just focused on my right hand. I've got to spend some time just focused on my left hand, all right? So that they start to do these things independently, all right? They're able to run in the background, as it were, as I've said before, and do it on their own, all right? Forming that good habit so that they can then be very independent. And of course, pianists have to do this from day one. You know, this hand is being loud, or this hand is being soft, or, you know, and gosh, it's like, and get into this level with piano where all of your fingers are independent from each other because you're voicing chords and making sure to bring out the third and the fifth or whatever. Okay, it gets pretty complicated. But yeah, independence of hands is a thing, and it's something that we have to focus on in our practice. Oops, part of the question's hidden here. Would you please, or could you explain and demonstrate how to integrate an open A string in a slur without creating a harsh sound on the open string? Well, that's a great question. Well, you know, first thing, if there's a string crossing and I want more control, the first thing I'm going to do is turn on my magic box. Okay. For example, what were we working on? Are there some open A's? I should have known that. There are no open A's in that. Well, let me just do the open strings. Here we go. This will be good. Okay. So it's this Goldterman I was working on with the student. Okay. So like it goes. Okay. All right. Forgive me. Okay. All right. So I sit down to play it. Sometimes the harsh sound comes because we go, all right, because we are not playing very rhythmical, okay, on the string crossings to begin with, okay. So that's number one, is to make sure that I've got the metronome going, and then I'm playing. Because if one of those is shorter than the other, especially the open A, if I'm going or something like that, all right, obviously it's going to be harsh, or there's going to be an unintentional accent, all right, because there's not this, you know, it's not the smooth transition that I need to have. Okay. The other thing that might cause funny sounds on the string crossings is not bringing our arm with us the way we're supposed to. Okay, so you know, just think about it, just follow the line of logic, which is, you know, okay, we're talking about tone here, right? And you know, what do I need to have better tone? Well, I got to have a better control over here. Okay, I have to have better suppleness in my fingers. I have to be in control of the bow correctly with the right part of my fingers. If I don't bring my arm with me, and I'd say I do one of these, I'm okay down here on the G, and then D, and then all of a sudden I get up here to the A, and I didn't really bring everything with me. I kind of cheated because my fingers are long, or I have a very long hand, right? And so I come up like this, and now I have this terrible bow hold. All right, pinky's not on the frog correctly. Guess what's bound to happen? It's bound to scratch, right? But if I maintain that, so I have, you know, down here I have this nice, my hand is hanging, I'm in control of my fingertips. If I have when I get to the top, right, I'm much more likely to be able, you know, making sure that my arm comes with me and supports my hand so that the approach can be the same when I'm on the A string, much more able to make a nicer sound, okay. So that's the two, that's the first two things are metronome, rhythm. Am I doing the string crossings rhythmically? Second is this whole mechanism coming with me to the A string the way it's supposed to? All right, or am I cheating or doing something funny? All right, but mirror. Again, I'm looking over here in the mirror to make sure that I'm keep maintaining this and that everything's coming with me the way it's supposed to. Okay, so I stay and control the bow when I go up there on the A string. Okay. There's some videos on the channel here about some exercises you can do for string crossings, like D and A back to D. All right, so that you're not going too far and really honing in on that distance of the string crossing. Checked out the Schroeder book 1. Are you talking about the 170 foundation studies I was talking about the other night? Yeah, it's a great book. It's a wonderful etude book. We were having fun going through the beginning there. Like the first 40 are just, there's many great etudes there in the Schroeder book. All right, I've owned that book forever and still use it. I have some markings in mine, from 1992. So that's how long I've had this copy of this book. So. How do you play the grace notes in the Brahms E minor cello sonata, the first movement? Oh boy, I'd have to dig that out. I played that piece on my junior recital, grace notes. Which grace notes? I'm trying to think now. Oi, that one's not popping to the top of my mind. I may have to answer that one in a later stream. That's a great question because I love that piece. Are you working on that piece currently? That's a wonderful piece. Grace notes. Which grace notes? I don't want to take the time. It's probably on the shelf. I think it's on the shelf. I'll have to dig that out and answer that later. Forgive me for not knowing that off the top of my head, but that's a wonderful question from a great composer. Well, anytime you have grace notes, you have to decide where in the beat they fall, right? Is it, and that's partly according to the style of the composer, right? Because we treat grace notes a little differently depending on what period they're from. Are they going to be with the beat, on the beat, after the beat, all that stuff. And also, make sure that you're practicing the principal note without the grace notes by themselves, okay? Because remember, anytime you have an ornament, it could be a turn or a mordant or a grace note or whatever, and you have to understand how that fits in with the main note, right? But in order to do that, all right, you got to play the main note by itself, okay? So that you know how the ornament fits in with the rest of it, okay? Always very, very important. Let's see. I've registered to audition and wanted to find out sharing tips on sight reading and approach during the excerpts. Make sure don't just go on YouTube and listen to the excerpts. That's obviously important. But make sure you go and listen to the whole piece, right? Whatever the piece is, context is everything. So, hearing whatever section of music they've given you to play, make sure you understand the rest of the piece because it just helps you play it better, right? Example that comes to mind, gosh, there's no way I could play Shostakovich 5 without thinking about all of the amazing stuff that's going on in the rest of the piece, because it's an incredible piece, and it's just like so many things going on. and it's such a great piece to perform. But I wouldn't know that unless I'd listened to it a lot and I'd played it a couple of times. So make sure you look up the actual performance, the full orchestra version of whatever excerpt that you are working on. As far as the sight reading goes, number one, if they're giving you time to do the sight reading, like if they say you have 30 seconds or you have 60 seconds or whatever, take it. Use it. Okay. If they're giving it to you, then it's yours to use. It doesn't, it's not a trick. It's not like, oh, we're going to give you 30 seconds, but we really want to see if you can use only 5 of them. That's not on anybody's mind, or it shouldn't be. And in fact, I would say, take your time and look at the excerpt and make the audition committee or whoever's listening to the audition, make them say, okay, whenever you're ready, because I've done that. Like I say, you have 30 seconds to look at the sight reading, you have 60 seconds, and then look at it. And if they're still not playing after, 90 seconds, and it's like, okay, please go ahead and start. I don't ding anybody points on that, or I would never take something away from somebody for taking a few extra seconds to look at sight reading. I want to see if they can look at it and, play it well. That's that's the point of sight reading. In a relatively short amount of time, and nobody's going to give you 4 extra minutes to look it over. Okay, so whatever time they're willing to give you there in that moment, okay, to look at it, take it, use it. I see all the time students come in and they're sight reading and they look at it for literally 2 seconds and then start playing. And it's it's like, I told you could have 30 seconds or you could have a few seconds to look it over. Anyway, so that's make sure you look at the key signature. Make sure that you don't rush. I mean, it's sight reading. Nobody expects you to go fast, I wouldn't think. All right. I mean, maybe it's a fast sight reading. I don't know. But, remember, tempo is only one aspect of music, right? There's pitch and dynamics and rhythm and phrasing and other musical things. So, okay, you went slow and you got that one aspect wrong, tempo. Okay, fine. Whoever's listening to you still knows a lot about your playing because you did everything else right. If you take the fast tempo or you go whatever you think the tempo should be, okay, you got that right, but then imagine that you got all the other things wrong, right? You got the intonation wrong, you got the dynamics wrong, you got the phrasing wrong, okay? So just think about that when it comes to tempo and slowing down, all right? Even if it's painfully slow, it's still just one aspect of the piece, okay? All right, I mean, you have to keep some kind of pulse, right? You can't go crazy slow, right? It still has to sound like the piece, okay? All right, but take your time. Was what I'm saying here. Okay. There's lots of comments here while I was on my diatribe about auditions, because I listened to a lot of auditions. Do you have a tip for 1 octave shift fast and smooth without jumping or slipping outside the string? I think, once you've built up, the control, the familiarity, all right, with whatever you're doing, then the smoothness just kind of comes, okay? But I'll see if I can say something better than that. Fast and smooth without jumping. Well, I would say, first of all, make sure that you're going slow. I know it seems like, always say that, but it is so very, very true for so many things, right? If we would just slow down, we would understand them better. Like famously in my own shifting video here on the channel uses this example, and I have a couple of students learning it now. It's the big shift in Humoresque, right? And so even right now, before I would attempt it for you all, I'd want to remind myself, which is what you should be doing in the practice room, which is, I think the smoothness comes from us just being dead centered and dead decided about what we want it to sound like. Excuse me. The tea is having a bad effect on me. So I want to play it down an octave. And then I know instantly it's out of tune. So let's do it again. We do all these things in first position smoothly because we've done them more, right? They are familiar to us. We feel comfortable doing them. We're able to stay relaxed while we're doing them because we trust ourselves while we're doing them, right? So I guess maybe what I'm getting to is that the first thing you have to do is trust yourself with this big octave shift. Yes. I always where I start to doubt myself is like, do I know if it's in tune? Do I know what those really, really high pitches are supposed to sound like? Because we don't play them that often, all right? And that's why this playing things in different octaves is so powerful, because then I can learn what D, C, B flat A, D, C, B flat A, all right? And that really, really knowing where that pitch is, already my left arm's going to relax a little bit more, okay? It's going to be a little bit more fluid, okay? When I'm afraid of what I'm doing because it is such a big shift and I don't feel like I know what the pitch is, then I start tensing up, and then I start, that's when I start hopping around and pulling on the string too tight because I'm too over worried about what I'm doing, okay? So get really comfortable. And then, of course, our old, my old standard, that I would say for any shift is if you want to learn to not jump or hop, then practice the slide, which I think everybody should practice the slide, because then you're hearing when you actually get to the note, yes? And that's going to help you with all of the stuff with shifting notes. Lots of comments popping up. What recommendations do you have for your students to practice effectively? Well, the first one is, get better about setting goals, which, I could say for myself as well, but thinking back in the times when I made the most progress or I had a really, really great practice session. And maybe some of that, thinking back to college, was, forced on me by, it was the last minute, stuff happens, studying happens, there's projects and tests, and then all of a sudden you have to play an excerpt for an audition. You're talking about audition excerpts. And then you're in the practice room going, I have to learn this right now. I have to learn to play this fast in 15 minutes or whatever. And you get really focused because you have this very, very specific goal. So that's number one, is like, what do you want to accomplish? It's, the whole goal setting thing is also just for our own mental health, so that when we're done practicing, we know what we accomplished or didn't accomplish, and then we can do something differently next time. A lot of times we sit down to practice and we just kind of practice, which can be helpful. It's not like it's wrong. I mean, it's always good to play. I mean, it's always, better to practice than not practice. But if we're just kind of playing through stuff, if we're just kind of, noodling around or going here and going there, instead of saying, I'd really like to fix the intonation in da-da-da-da-da, you fill in the blank, or I'd really like to fix the string crossings in fill in the blank. I'd really like to fix the shifting, the big shift, okay? I have to learn Hemeresque. I'd really love to fix, actually, the first shift, not the big octave one. I'm not there yet. I don't want to do that. That's just going to make me feel bad. I want to work on the other one, okay? Or I want to work on the, the leggero in Humoresque. All right. Some kind of goal, all right, to help you practice. Make sure you're recording yourself and listening back. It's just, you have to do it, all right? And it's so easy now with phones and iPads or whatever to record yourself, okay? In general, on the whole, students don't record themselves enough, okay? Not nearly enough. I don't know that you need to do it multiple times every single practice session. Well, there might be a time for that. If you're kind of at the end of learning a piece and you're really trying to polish it up, at some point you're playing a piece and it's like you're reading that research paper that you're not actually reading it on the page because you have it memorized, and so you're missing all the typos, and you have to have somebody else read it so they can tell you where all the mistakes are, right? And it's the same thing with playing. We're playing and we're so into the piece and we know it so well that we need that outside observer perspective, all right, to really be able to see what we're doing wrong, and that's why the recording is so effective, all right, to record yourself. I hope that answers the question. There's that, how to practice is like a whole discipline in and of itself, yes, and there are volumes, there are many books. The very first one I ever read when I got to college was The Art of Violin Practice by Robert Gerle, Gerle. I don't even know if that's still in print. So that's a great one. We also were asked to read Inner Game of Tennis. There's an inner game of music. There's like an inner game of everything. There's an inner game of golf. It was a movement in the 70s. This tennis instructor who invented something kind of, I think it was also called yoga tennis. Anyway, and he talks a lot in there about being this third-person observer. That there's us that's doing, and there's us that's catching our mistakes and trying to analyze, and then there's this this other third something out there that's watching and gluing the other two together and kind of being both of those things at the same time. It's a very interesting read. Oh wow, we have 9 people on the stream now. Yay! It's awesome. I'm so glad that this time is popular. I hope that you guys are finding, I hope I'm trying to answer, because there's so many great questions here. This is awesome. I hope I'm not going too fast. I hope my answers are helping you guys this evening or afternoon. What time is it? A couple of you told me where you are in the world. Let me know what time of day it is for you all. Trying to think what came up while I'm waiting for another question. What came up in the studio this week? There was something yesterday as I was teaching. I mentioned a lot about being really, really picky about the tone. And actually, this goes back to the practicing effectively question. Because obviously, going fast is something that we're all always working on, right? How do you play fast? And I think that there's something that happens when we're playing a slow piece, right? Which is, and I know we say practice slow a lot, but I'm talking about something a little bit different here, is that when you get really picky about the tone, and there was a question, I think, from Woodside Story, you asked a question earlier about, making a good tone on open A. If I get really, really picky about the tone, about what I'm doing over here in the right hand, and I say, this is going to be my goal for the practice session, is that I'm not going to have any slides of the bow. I'm not going to have any scratches. I'm going to have as close to perfect of a tone, unattainable, but I'm gonna try to make it as close to perfect as I possibly can. That level of detail to your right hand, it does something so incredibly special that it just gets you more engaged over here with what you're doing. And I think some of that transfers into other things like playing fast, or there's a question earlier, about the loud vibrato, soft vibrato, about the independence of hands. And so, I was just, telling you all, because there's a lot of things that get solved and a lot of things that get helped just by being pickier about the tone. All right? Don't let yourself get away with, letting the bow scratch or swim all over the string or whatever. Oh, 5:55 a.m. in Nigeria. Wow, that's awesome. It's a new one. That's great. Thank you for tuning in. That's fantastic. Yeah, we have people from all over. It's noon, 3 p.m., 5:55 a.m. I love YouTube. I love the internet. I think it's great that we can all come together here. This is fantastic. Makes me happy. Is memorizing your music something musicians should strive for? I love this question. Because I've always thought that I struggled with memorizing, and I kind of did for a while. And now I've come to realize that, because it's like I would think to myself, Clay, you have a really good memory, actually. You have a really good long-term memory. Why do you struggle with memorizing music? And here's why. It's the just playing through stuff effect. It's the just going from beginning to end. I think, and I hope this is answering the question, I think in some cases that if you're really, really kind of digging into the music and making connections and making decisions about, I think this note should do this, or I think these two notes go together for this reason. You're making the connections. The memorization comes as just a natural byproduct of that, right? And then, am I thinking about how all the parts fit together? Like, oh, this line is the same as this line. Oh yeah, or oh look, looking for the patterns in the music. Like in my classroom, we sight read actually out of a book called Pattern Play. It's a wonderful book. And we talk about these connections. We talk about, oh look, these notes are going here and doing this, and oh yeah, this is like this, and we just kind of talk through it. And every once in a while, we'll talk through it, and then I'll say, okay, close the book, and we'll play it from memory the first time. The first time we play through it. And it's amazing that, by the middle of the year or toward the end of the year, that students can play, and even myself, because I always thought this is not something I'm very good at, or blah, blah, blah. But, you learn to make these connections, and you learn to think about music a little bit differently, and then all of a sudden you're playing a piece that's 2 or 3 lines long, and you're playing it for the first time, and you're playing it from memory. Okay? So, is memorizing something you should strive for? I would rephrase the question and say, is making connections in music, is looking for patterns in music something you should strive for? Absolutely. And then we just automatically memorize your music? Yes, you will. All right. Yes, you will. And if you're struggling to memorize music, okay, then let that be a symptom of you knowing I'm not making enough decisions about the parts of what I'm doing. Okay? Yeah. It's like a litmus test, I would say. Yeah. And of course, some people just memorize better than others. That is true. Like my wife. she can play pieces that she learned when she was 8, and she hasn't played them for 30 years. And then, her mom's here and they're playing together, and boom, she just like whips it out and starts playing it. It's truly a gift. I do not have that. I'm not there. But some people just make this connection with what they're doing, and they're able to make the decision so easily, and it just sticks. But I think that's why it sticks, because they're so decisive about what they're going for. Do you do mental practice? What's that story? This is my favorite topic of the last few years. Yes, I do. All the time. All the time. There's been lots of studies. The very first, if I can geek out here for a moment, you can look it up. It was a study of basketball players that became famous. That was the first kind of scientific study of mental practice. Right? So they took, experiment. There's always a control group, and they say, okay, this is just the group that's going to just practice, or we're not going to say anything to them, right? And then there's the group that's just going to practice normally, and then we're going to have this third group where they're going to practice free throws, just mentally. They're not actually going to throw balls. And of course, these players, wherever they were, that practiced mentally, made progress. I think the article even says in some cases just as much as those that did the traditional practice. Okay. Now, the caveat to this is that in order to have effective mental practice, you have to have some kind of facility. You have to kind of like know, if you're a complete beginner and had never picked up an instrument, and didn't know anything about the sensations of what's going on or what this is, mental practice isn't going to do very good. But if you've done it for a while, okay, and this is actually in the Robert Gurley book that I mentioned earlier, is that you can mental practice, and when you're doing it right, you're really seeing, yourself playing, okay? And so I diagnose physical mistakes, physical habits all the time with mental practice. I'll imagine myself playing it. Remember, mental practice is not a visual thing. You're not just watching yourself do something. Okay, this is not the third party person looking in. Okay, this is you sitting there imagining yourself playing. Okay, the sound and the physical sensations, all of it. Okay, and at the same time looking on, so that you can diagnose things that you are doing incorrectly. It is super powerful and super important to do. Okay, it doesn't replace regular practice, but I find that while I'm practicing, if I'm really struggling with something, it can help me realize that, say on a string crossing, I'm not really quite keeping my hand on the bow the way I want to, or my hands aren't really being independent the way they need to be, okay? Or that I have some kind of tension somewhere while I'm shifting around or vibrating that I need help with. Let me think of something more specific. I've forever had this tendency to kind of play away from the cello instead of letting my left hand really come into the fingerboard, okay, and be there and be settled, all right, just kind of playing in this kind of tense, kind of, worried and uptight way. And the mental practice has helped me get this left arm in and get it settled, but also it's helped me get my right arm more engaged, right? I tend to kind of let up, or used to. I'm getting better about really settling the weight into my right hand and arm. Whereas, I would kind of play away and I would kind of tense up. And what would happen is my right arm would follow that, okay? And so the mental practice, anyway, yeah. I maybe perhaps I haven't talked about it as much because it's it's a little bit, how shall I say, out there. It's a little esoteric. Um, it's one thing I wish in the future for us to have more concrete science and evidence, and I hope that in the future we can talk about that in a real pedagogical way, because it is so very important and so very necessary in what you're doing. So anyway, yeah. Oh, it is a fascinating topic. Well, because our brains, you know, our brains are very, very complex, right? It's like my whole thing that, that we move towards sound, right? Your brain is wired in a way that you have this way station between your senses and all of the cortices up in the front of your brain, and your thalamus is telling the prefrontal cortex or the motor cortex or whatever. It's kind of telling it like what kind of sensory information it's getting, right? It's not just like we hear something or we see something or we touch something and it goes straight to some executive function. There's this little middleman there in our brains, so that like when I reach for my tea, right, to pick up the can off my desk, that is different than reaching for the C natural and humoresque, right? That's two very, very different things. So it kind of makes sense that there's a part of your brain that lets your motor cortex know this is different. I'm reaching for a sound out here in space somewhere, right? I'm not reaching for an object, okay? And I got, somehow I have to know the difference, right? That topic fascinates me very much. Very, very much. So. All right. I just realized it is 12:07. I'm having too much fun. And there are 3 more live streams coming. What do you guys want to talk about tomorrow night? I think I forgot to put that on the community tab here on YouTube. I said that you, the community, should pick the topic of our final live week live stream tomorrow at 6 p.m. But I haven't gotten any messages about that. That's okay. There's always tomorrow. I'm going to do one. What am I doing tomorrow? I have so many scheduled tomorrow. There's going to be one about, we're going to warm up at 9. And then I think the one at 11 is, I said, some of my favorite things, some of my usual suspects of things to gear up your cello battle station. And then whatever you guys want at 6 p.m. Central for the last one. So, all right. I'm going to say, well, I know it's not good night where some of you are. I'm going to say so long, farewell. As always, it has been my sincere pleasure to do this with you guys. Thanks for hanging out for a whole hour here while we chat some cello. Famous cellist and your favorite pieces, buy them. Oh, for the topic for tomorrow night. Oh, that is, yeah, that would be fun. There's a performance here on YouTube I haven't watched in a while. One of my favorite Yo-Yo Ma performances. That might be interesting. Double stops and chords. Oh, that's a good one. Double stops and chords. That's a good one. I appreciate. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. Woodside Story. Thanks for being such a great supporter for the channel. Thank you to some of the new people as well. It's great to meet all of you here on the live stream. But yeah. Thank you for that. I enjoy it. I enjoy it, and it's a pleasure. So, this makes year. I started teaching cello lessons in 2004. So yeah, we're almost there. Almost 20 years of teaching cello. Getting close. Getting close. This will be my 15th year in the classroom teaching orchestra. So it's been a fun and exciting journey. So I'm looking forward to more music making this coming year. So, all right, guys. Well, hopefully I will see you tomorrow on another live stream, or somewhere in the future here on YouTube. Take care, guys.